Hi, it's Carolyn. I'm here to help you learn how to bake and decorate amazing cakes. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to make the perfect tire cake. And these tire cakes I usually make for, any car themed cake, monster trucks, learning how to drive, turning 16. But in the past, it was just a mess. I used to take my Dresden tool and make impressions in the fondant, and this is what it looked like. Or I would cut pieces of fondant out for the treads and put them on the cake, and that was a nightmare. It wasn't until I found this impression mat. I'm so glad I found this. It makes the tire cakes look so much better. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to use this properly on your fondant to make your tire cake. So I'll show you how to do it if it's a bottom tier of your cake and also one of the upper tiers. And all of the tools that I use will be linked in the description. So let's get started. I got my cake out of the refrigerator and I have a tape measure and I'm just measuring the circumference and the height so I can cut this to the correct size. I'll put that back in the refrigerator. And now I have some black fondant here. And in this fondant is this Gumtex powder, Tylose powder, CMC powder. It's all basically the same thing. I sprinkle a little bit in the marshmallow fondant. I only work with marshmallow fondant. I guess I get the best result from that. But you need it in there and let it sit. You need to give it time for the Tylose powder to work. It's going to make the fondant stretchy and so much easier to work with. I have a video showing you how to get the fondant to the correct consistency, and I will link that below. So now this is still a little too soft for me to use the impression, so I let it sit for a little bit. Here is the impression mat that I'm using, and it is just a little shorter than the height of my cake, so I'm going to have to cut it a little longer. So let's try to roll this out. So I roll it into a little log, sprinkle down some cornstarch, and then flatten it out a little bit. And then I want to roll it a little tall before I roll it really long. And I want to roll it about 1/4 of an inch thick and make sure that it is long enough, but then it was sticking to the countertop and it's still a little too soft. So let me just knead this together and I'm going to let it sit out again for another like 10 minutes before I continue. So 10 minutes later, I'm trying this again. So let's roll it into a log and then I want to flatten it out, get some cornstarch down, and I'm going to roll it out again. Hopefully this time it won't stick to the countertop. If it's sticking to the countertop, it'll stick to the impression mat and it's going to be a nightmare. So let me roll it out tall before I roll it out really long. And I just want to take my ruler and make sure it's long and tall enough so it will wrap around the cake. And you can see it's about 1/8 or 1/4 of an inch thick. So you need it to be thick enough that when you press the impression into it, it will go into the fondant and won't poke a hole. So I've smoothed it out with my fondant smoother. And then I like to individually press all of these little cavities onto the fondant. I don't want to use a rolling pin and roll it on there. And do you see I'm not going all the way to that very last one that's cut off? I'm only going to the ones that are completely full. And I just make sure I press down on all the cavities and lift that up, and that looks really good. So now when I continue, I don't want to leave a little space there, so I need to overlap it a little bit. So I overlap that pattern. The bottom 3 are already overlapped on the pattern I already made, so I'm pressing down on the rest of that impression mat, and I'm stopping again before I get to that top one that's cut off. And then I'm aligning the bottom 3 on the ones I already did, and I'm not pressing down on those back 3, and then I'm going all the way up almost to the top, and I'm not pressing all the way to the edge where that one is cut off. So do you see there's a pattern here? So I'm overlapping the back 3, don't press on the back 3, and then continue the pattern. And here's what it looks like. It looks really good. Sorry my camera's a little shaky when I was doing this, but the pattern is continuous if you do it this way, and it looks pretty seamless. So I need to cut a small border on the bottom and the top, and I just use my pizza cutter to carefully cut a straight line, just using that pattern as a guide as to how thick I want that little border. So I'm not cutting it exactly on that pattern. I'm giving it maybe like 1/8 of an inch space above and below. This way it's going to stick up off the top of the cake just a little bit the way I want it to be. So you can see how I have that little border there. Then I take my rulers and I just want to straighten this out. And then I got my cake out of the refrigerator. I have some piping gel here, and I just want to get some piping gel all along the side, all the way from the top to the bottom. And once I have that covered, I dip my paintbrush in a little bit of water and then just rub that on the outside just to smooth out that piping gel. I take a dry paper towel and just remove as much liquid as I can off of that cutting board, and I'm rolling that up from one end to the other, making sure that bottom edge is all lined up. I'm starting in the back, and do you see how I'm pressing it against the cake? That way no air bubbles form behind it and it's completely sticking down. Then I stick my ruler down and I cut between both of those pieces of fondant, peel that back piece away, and then push the front piece down and create that perfect seam. And I'm just refining it and make sure it's all pushed down against the cake. And take my dry paintbrush and try to remove some of this cornstarch and remove it with a paper towel off of the cake board. Now I have some Crisco vegetable shortening, and I like to remove cornstarch using this method. So I'm just doing a light coating of this vegetable shortening on a paintbrush just to remove all of that cornstarch. Now, if you have a steamer, you can use a steamer. I don't have a steamer. I prefer to do it this way. You could do it whatever way you like. But you don't want too much shortening on here. So I'm just taking that brush without any more shortening on it, and I'm just trying to remove that excess shortening. So you don't see me wiping that brush off on a dry paper towel. And then I took a clean dry paper towel and I'm just removing some more shortening. And then again, taking that paintbrush that's all wiped off, I don't have any excess shortening on it, and I'm just running that over the cake, trying to remove as much excess shortening as possible. And the paintbrush gets into those little crevices, so I'm able to remove the shortening in between all those little patterns. And then I just did it one more time for good measure with a paper towel, and let's put that back in the refrigerator. Now you may think that looked a little too shiny, but as that shortening sets into the fondant, it absorbs into the fondant basically, and it doesn't look as shiny. It just looks like it's a nice deep black color. So that sat in the refrigerator overnight and it's not as shiny as it was. Now I didn't fill in the top of this because with this cake I was filling in the top of it with some dirt, some Oreo cookie dirt. So I did not put a fondant circle on top of that tire. So that's one option for you. And I also want to show you how I do it when it's an upper tier. So I have that top tier on that cardboard circle, and again I'm getting piping gel along the side and I thin it out with water, and then I start in the back, I wrap it around where it meets in the back, I put my ruler down and I cut through both of the pieces, and then I remove the fondant and press the seam together. And this time I want to put another piece of fondant on the top. So that was a 6-inch cake, and I have a 6-inch cake pan just to measure the size of the piece of fondant that I need. So I decided to do a silver piece on top of this. If you want it to look like a tire, you can just do a black piece of fondant instead. But I have this impression mat, and I use the impression mat the same way that I did the tire. And this mat and the tire mat come in a set, so that will be linked in the description. So I just continue the pattern on here. And then I put that cake pan upside down and make that little impression and use my cutter to cut just on the inside of that. And I want to make sure that it's the correct size. So I take it over to my cake. I see that it's hanging over the edge a little bit and I just need to trim it a little bit more. So I'm trimming it down to size, and then I want to paint this silver. So I have some Rolcom Super Silver powder mixed with a little bit of lemon extract. That'll be linked in the description. And I just paint this entire thing silver. And I do 2 coats because the second coat always brings it out a little deeper. Then to put this on the cake, I just get a little bit of water down, and then I'm going to put that silver piece on top. And again, you could just do a black piece of fondant if you just want it to be black and look like a tire. And I put that back in the refrigerator, and then I stacked the cake and I dabbled the cake. And I do have a video showing you how I make this entire cake. This will be linked in the description for you. This was a Hot Wheels cake design, I believe. And then I do the same thing. To shine it up, I use that Crisco shortening and a paintbrush and just brush a light layer of that shortening all along the outside, and then remove the excess with that paintbrush and a paper towel. So there you go. How much better does this tire cake look than those stupid ones that I made before? I found this awesome impression mat, and again, I think I got this on Amazon. It will be linked in the description for you. And actually, before I found this mat, I found the pattern online. I couldn't find the mat. And for this cake, I hand cut each individual tread, and this cake took me forever. It was so annoying. I am so glad that I found this. I will link it below. And just to review really quick, a few things that are very important to get this to work correctly. Number one, you must have Tyler's powder, Gum-Tex powder, CMC powder mixed into your fondant. I have a video where I go into detail on how to get your fondant to a smooth and stretchy consistency, and I'm going to link that below. But this stuff is going to make the fondant set a little harder, and you're going to want to let the fondant sit out a little bit so the impression mat won't stick to it. So it's very important that you add this to the fondant, knead it in there, and let it sit. You saw in the video how the fondant was still a little too soft and it stuck to the countertop, so you have to give it a little bit of time and be patient with it. The second thing is to remember that this is a certain height, right? Like I can't make the tread in this any bigger than it is in the impression. And from bottom to top is about 4¼ inches tall. Like I showed you, I measured my cake to see how tall it was, and then I cut those borders above and below the tread just so it would stick out over the top just a little bit so that dirt wouldn't fall out. I like to wrap it around the cake so it's a little bit taller. That way I can either, fill it with dirt or put that fondant circle in there. And that way the circle will come to the inside of the top edge of the tire tread. So the cake that I put this on was a 2-layer, not torted 7-inch cake. And I have a video where I talk about when I tort and when I don't tort my cakes. That'll be linked below. But the reason I went with a 2-layer, not torted cake is because it was going to be a little shorter than my regular cakes, which is a 2-layer torted. And those end up being about 5 inches tall. And if I don't tort it, it's about the height of that impression mat, about 4¼ inches tall, 4½ inches tall. Now the one where I showed you the upper tier that I did, that was a 2-layer torted cake, so the borders on top and below the impression had to be a little thicker. And again, I do have a tutorial showing you how I decorated that Hot Wheels cake, and that will be linked below. I also filmed this cake that I made was a monster truck theme. I did film it. If you guys want me to edit it and put it together so you can see the entire cake, let me know in the comments below. And one more thing, I'm sure that people will ask if you can use this on a buttercream cake. And the reason why I just prefer to do it on fondant, well, there's a couple reasons why. Number one, it's a little difficult to match up the pattern because on this end here, it's cut off. So if you're pressing it against the side of the cake, it might be a little difficult to match it up. Also, there is a big border down here. So if your cake is too short, the pattern won't match up with the cake. So could you use it on buttercream? I'm sure you could. You would just have to take necessary precautions, make sure that the cake is even and that your icing is crusted over, so you could only really do it on a cake that's iced with American buttercream. If you use a meringue buttercream, they don't form a crust, so you really can't press these impression mats into them. But if you try it on a buttercream cake with success, please let me know. So I think that's it. What new techniques did you learn in this video? I would love to know. Leave it in the comments below. And just a reminder, I do have a Cake Academy membership program where I can help you elevate your cakes to the next level. The top 2 tiers have access to my exclusive Facebook group, and in that group I go live, I teach classes, I post videos that I don't post publicly on social media, we help each other with pricing, we do cake critiques, and I post pictures of all of the cakes that I make along with the prices that I charged. So I would love to have you aboard. All that information is in the description. Please like this video if you liked it, and if you're enjoying my tutorials, I would be so grateful if you could buy me a coffee. My link is down below. And I would love it if you would keep in touch on socials, and you can check out my website. If you want to stick around, you can watch this video next and hit subscribe and the bell if you haven't already. Thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. And remember, it's cake, have fun. I will see you on the next one. Bye.